couldn't sleep the other night. Have you got any remedies? When I couldn't sleep the other night, I was digging into our pitching conversations and pitching experience, and came up with an idea. And I would like to put that idea to you and see what you think.
Is this the first time I'm hearing this idea?
Yeah, unless
This is an exclusive.
Unless you've read my LinkedIn post today.
I don't spend any time on LinkedIn.
So, a pre-pitch agreement that is signed by both sides, agency and brand. So let's take the scenario of an inbound's come to us. We'd like you to pitch. Here's our RFP, our brief. We think, yep, bob on that. And we turn round to the brand with a pre-written, pre-pitch document, agreement, whatever we want to call it. Both sides sign it, we sign it, they sign it, and effectively all it really is a management of expectations, documented but signed, crucially signed off by both sides. So a really dumbed down version could be 2 columns. First column on the left-hand side, brands, what we expect of you, and right-hand side, agencies, what we expect from you, and bullet points on either side. In terms of, as I've just said, what each side needs from the other side to actually go ahead, sign into this as a process from this point onwards and go and pitch to that brand. So, for example, we might ask brands to commit to a 30-minute conversation post-pitch to gather feedback rather than it being loose, and so often is the case. Find out that we might not have won something, want to get feedback, and we never actually get that opportunity, or it's just a couple of lines on an email. I think the process exists and lots of people are good at it, bad at it, better at it. I think we're on a big journey to get better at that pre-qualification, if we call it that. But what do you think about actually signing something at that sort of stage?
It could go one of two ways. It could either be a good thing that they're like signing off their intent by giving you that gesture of signing, or it could go the other way and be like, I don't want to sign that.
Yeah.
And then the conversation and the communication maybe break down. I think maybe we've discussed this a little bit, I guess, around the pitching process, but maybe an extension of what you're talking about there, in my mind, that I think could possibly be a good thing, depending on the client, is to agree a chargeable pitch that is not charged upon success. So you agree the pitch process and you price it in the same way that you would perhaps a discovery phase. Because there's an amount of work involved in putting a pitch together. Then if you're not successful, you bill for the time or the pre-agreed price. But if you win the business that you're pitching for, depending on what the scale of that is, you don't charge for the pitch.
Do you not think that the same barriers could exist with that approach? So the one that I thought that I'm suggesting I'm really seeing it potentially, the strength of it being sat within an inbound. We want you to pitch. So they've obviously hopefully seen something that they like about our agency. We're intrigued to hear you pitch for this piece of work. We're inviting you to pitch. Surely the turnaround at that point of, yeah, we'd love to, but here's how pitches go when you're dealing with flaunt, can either go exactly the way that you're saying with a monetary value in there, but that's going to turn some people off, I'm sure. Yep. So I feel like it's potentially a slightly softer, maybe a meet in the middle thing. Be interesting though, I guess, how would it work from they come to us, let's say, inbound, we say, this is great, this is the process that we follow at Flaunt, we'd love you to sign in so that we all are on the same page. These are the commitments, pre-pitch, during pitch, after pitch. Feedback, for example, is a good one after pitch that I know we all struggle with. I don't know how that'd work from their expectations. What them inputting into a document like that. Guess it'd have to be collaborative, wouldn't it? To an extent, you'd kind of send our draft version over to them and see what they need from us.
I guess it comes down to what you're trying to avoid by getting them to do that. Does that make sense? Like, a lot of the time and situations I'm sure we've all been in where a brand will use the process as a fact-finding, strategy review kind of mission. Are you trying to avoid that by outlining the process and outlining the deliverables and setting people's expectations?
I think so. I think it's expectation management and intent. I think the intent thing. I mean, you tell me. When I was thinking about this, I was like, what is it even worth the paper that it'd be written on in terms of it being, getting a signature on it, in theory, feels to me more commitment, so the intent. But then I was thinking of this in other documents that we day-to-day signing, NDAs, for example. Are NDAs that, I'm not going to say enforceable, because obviously the minute you sign something and something goes wrong, you can refer back to that document that's signed and see if we can get to the bottom of a potential issue that an NDA covered. But I mean, kind of going off piece, but it's, I guess, documentation. Are NDAs kind of worth the paper that they're written on, and therefore we're putting my idea in the same boat, if you know what I mean?
I mean, NDAs are enforceable. Obviously, they exist for that reason, but I think in the majority of circumstances where an NDA comes into it, it's a step towards getting more comfortable in the feeling of trusting the person that you're asking to sign that, and that is on multiple levels. And although you may never have any intention of having to act on anything that's within an NDA, the principle and the psychology behind having then had that conversation, got someone to reciprocally sign a NDA, it instills almost like an unspoken mutual trust that that conversation's been acknowledged.
Yeah.
And I think that potentially is the same thing as what you're getting at. I think perhaps if you did do the outline, the expectations, what you need to see from us kind of thing, and even if that goes across the table and they don't read it but they sign it, it's an extra layer of intent having to have spent the time signing it, and also it gives the relationship perhaps an additional layer of trust.
Yeah. Do you think it would give off a vibe in that exact scenario that I said? So someone coming to us as an inbound, come and pitch, and we say we've got this pre-pitch agreement, whatever we call it. Do you think it'd give off a vibe to the brand that this agency have got the shit together? Like, oh, we're part of like, this is just...
I mean, I don't know. You could go down lots of routes with the concept of that from a psychology standpoint. It's like, imagine if we got inbound inquiries, or we had like a handful of inbound inquiries come through at once, and then we went back to them all and said, we've currently got a waiting list. So we're being very selective about who we progress conversations with. That creates a feeling immediately of superior service. It then also probably creates a little bit more of a want from the person who's put the inquiry in, because they can't just get at you. And if they've made an inquiry in the first instance, they're obviously looking for or entering into thinking about needing the services that you provide, and it won't just be a random email. So imagine then going back to someone and saying, we've got a waiting list, so we're only pursuing conversations we feel are relevant. We've audited your brand and we feel like you'd be a good fit for us and we feel like we could deliver what you're looking for, how that would then make them feel. And it's almost like the same psychology behind forming the brief for the pitch process.
Yeah.
And
I think all of the similarities between these different ideas and the shape in which they could arrive as part of this process is all centered around driving, like you're saying, trust, intent. We're on the same page. We would like to run this process the way that we would with your collaboration, but effectively trying to mitigate the shitty things that we've all experienced before during pitch processes that need a kick up the arse and a change. I do wonder, the psychology of putting something in place. It really resonates with me as potentially working, especially with inbounds, because you're naturally in a better position where someone's come. When I say better position, I mean a more in control position when someone comes to knock on your door to say, we've had a look at you, you need to see this brief, we want your opinion. It went off on a wild goose chase there when I was starting thinking about NDAs and whether they're actually worth the paper that they're written on. But let's say that idea that I've brought to the table is something that we say pass on to the next inbound lead, just say we had it in place. Everyone signs it, pitch goes well, and we get to I'm going to call it the dreaded fucking feedback stage. And let's say in that document where everyone signed, it's a commitment to a 30-minute, however you want to describe it, comprehensive, thorough feedback video call. I guess what could happen if they don't pull the weight there? What can you do? What can you enforce, really? Would there have to be stipulations in that? That's the bit where I wonder whether it falls down.
Yeah, you can't force someone to jump on have a meeting or jump on a call about feedback. That's not possible, is it? But I think if they maybe have that upfront knowledge that that's a part of the process, you've probably got more chance of that happening. Yeah.
I think that was where I was coming from with that idea. I think you're absolutely right. It's trying to build trust and gain trust, but critically for me, making sure everyone's on the same page before the pitch, because it's all well and good. It can be quite an exciting time, can't it? Giddy I've got this brief to get out to the agencies receiving it, getting ahead of yourselves, let's just get straight into it. Whereas if you can slow it down and calm it down with a thorough bullet pointed process that, as I say, I think exists out there, this was just formalising it into a bit of a document. It's pre-qualification as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think these ideas and that very concept is almost being born out of the shift in the industry towards value being placed on marketing services. Whereas like 10 years ago, the agency model is outbound. And now I think if you're known for what you do as an agency and you are getting approached, then you do have more control over the process in general. And I think that shift is happening. I think more importance, more representation in the boardroom for marketing, more open communication from marketers, that holding on to your value a little bit more as an agency. All these things are shifting the process along.
I think we should try. I think if you've got enough pipeline quantity, I think it's worth trying these things, because we're spitballing the psychological element, I'm going to say the enforceable element or not of these things. It'd be really interesting. I posted it out on LinkedIn this morning and got a few nibbles of people saying, I like it. Interestingly, if I've said to you, guess whether they were brand side or agency side, where they all sat. It doesn't take a genius, but it would be interesting to get brand feedback on that and gauge how they'd be responsive to maybe a brand new steps to the process that they're used to from a pitch management perspective.
I'm going to go with that we're a marketing community that we're.
Yeah.
So that is validation for what we just said there about the shift in agencies' approach to pitching and opinion of pitching. I think you could almost go completely other end of the spectrum and say, look, right, we know we've got chops in these services. You pitch to us. Why do you want to be our client?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be quite...
And then the confidence comes from us knowing that we can deliver an outcome for you. But why should we then work with you?
Really, if you dig into all of this, as we say, it's because so many elements are so broken.
It's just an industry that I think has had a way of doing things for so long that it's almost like if it ain't broke kind of mentality. But the practices were probably broken while they were happening.
Yeah. I think it's been burnt, and it's coming from an experience of being burnt by it. That's why I'm lying in bed, not being able to sleep, and thinking, how can we refine for the benefit of us? And ultimately, this wasn't just a self-centred idea. I can see it benefiting some brands that we've dealt with in the past, and hopefully we will in the future. It's not just we're protecting ourselves here, because I saw it as a mutual list of obligations, expectations. So I think we should try it.
I'm on board.